FSU proved that they're the top team in the ACC right now, beating Clemson 31-24 in overtime. This wasn't a great performance by Florida State, in my opinion. I feel like Clemson outplayed Florida State for the first 3 quarters, and then in the 4th quarter, Clemson just absolutely imploded. And not just in the 4th quarter, the game really started to tilt in Florida State's favor after Kalen DeLoach had that big hit on Cade Klubnik that resulted in a scoop and score touchdown, and it tied the game up at 24-24. And then when Clemson had the opportunity to go ahead and get the field goal, which was from 29 yards out, which would have made this game 27-24, they ended up missing the field goal. And not just that they missed the field goal, but there was questionable play calling, bad clock management. You talk about finding ways to lose a game. Clemson gave you a one-on-one for how to do that. Florida State, defensively, they played really good when it mattered the most. And Florida State is a really good team. Now, I don't know if they're good enough to win it all, because in this game, I would have loved for them to win this matchup a little bit more convincingly. As I just said, I feel like Clemson looked like the better team for the majority of this game. Offensively, they were moving the ball pretty consistently. They were balanced, not just having success throwing the football with Cade Klubnik, but they also had a lot of success on the ground game as well. As a matter of fact, they outgained Florida State in rushing yards 146-22. Florida State didn't look like a better team than Clemson in this game, although they got the win. Florida State, they tend to play their best football when the game is on the line. If you can't finish Florida State and you allow them to hang around and you give them opportunities to stay in the game, they're going to make you pay. And this FSU team reminds me a lot of that 2013 Florida State team. You remember, well, not 2013, but 2014, the year after they won the national championship, when they lost to Oregon in the semifinals and they were coming from behind in pretty much every single game they played in. That Florida State team and FSU had an uncanny ability to be able to flip the switch in the 4th quarter. That's how I look at this 2023 Florida State team. Yeah, they may not play their best football for the first few quarters, but when the game is on the line and they need big plays to stay alive, they are able to make those big plays happen. You got guys such as Keon Coleman, who had 2 touchdowns in this game. Clemson couldn't find any way to stop him. He had a 50-50 ball, really early into overtime, which pretty much sealed the win for Florida State. Clemson, although they looked like the better team in this game, they didn't execute to the point that Florida State was able to when the game was on the line. When the game was in balance, Florida State got more big plays. Clemson was unable to get those plays. Dabo Swinney, you got to look at him in this game, and you got to ask him, okay, Dabo, so what's your next move? Are you going to start utilizing the transfer portal like Florida State, or are you just going to continue to have your same approach that you have had over the last couple of years? Because obviously it's not working anymore because Florida State has caught up to you. Now, you can look at this and say, well, if it wasn't for the missed field goal, we would have won this game. True. But if you would have utilized the transfer portal and you actually got a good kicker out of the transfer portal, maybe you would have won this game. Maybe Keon Coleman never would have had the opportunity to burn you in overtime if you didn't allow that to happen by having your field goal position or your kicker position up to snow. Clemson just doesn't look like a team that looks like they can compete for a national championship. And it's been like this for the last 2-3 seasons, ever since they were able to make it to the national championship years ago and win it with Trevor Lawrence. This team hasn't had that same level of dominance, in my opinion. They just don't have that same level of execution when the game is in the balance. Florida State, defensively, I felt they played a pretty good game, but offensively, this offense kind of got out to a little bit of a slow start. Jordan Travis and Johnny Wilson connected on a big play. Their last drive of regulation, even though they didn't turn it into points. Then you had Keon Coleman, who was making big plays. It's just the transfer portal is the main reason why Florida State has now overtaken Clemson for being the top team in the ACC. Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, Jordan Travis, all three of those guys came from the transfer portal. Jared Verse, he came from the transfer portal. All those guys had big impacts on this win for Florida State. Dabo Swinney, he's going to have to change something because there's a very strong chance that maybe this season starts to go really left for Clemson. They may not even be able to win 9-10 games this year. This is the first time since 2010 that Clemson has started out 0-2 in conference play. That's really discouraging. Florida State, on the other hand, you're still undefeated. There's still a lot of football that has to be played. You got to go up against Miami. And I think that Miami game is going to be very close. It could go either way. I think the Hurricanes have a very good chance of being able to pull off the upset. Plus, it's a rivalry game, so you already know how those games tend to go more times than not. But for right now, for any FSU fan that wants to say they're the top dog in the ACC, you now have permission to do so. Because to be the man, you have to beat the man. And what did FSU do finally? They were able to finally knock off Clemson. And the winner of this game ends up winning the ACC the majority of the times. If Florida State ends up some way, somehow going up against Clemson in a rematch in the conference championship game, I still like them to come out on top with the victory because I still think we have yet to see Florida State play their best football the last 2 weeks. Outside of that week 1 win against LSU, this hasn't looked like the same Florida State team that we saw in the win against LSU. Against Boston College, they kind of struggled. Against Clemson, although they got the win, and that's all that really matters at the end, I still feel like they could have been better in a lot of different areas. Offensively, they could have been a little bit better when it came to the play caller late in this game. I don't know why they were trying to take deep shots their final drive of the game when they really should have been trying to get into field goal range, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because they got the win. But this is still far from a perfect football team, and although I do think that FSU is the team to beat right now in the ACC, I'm still not ready to say that this team is good enough to win it all. I still need to see better execution because watching Clemson play, I didn't really see a Clemson team that was outmatched and was less talented than Florida State, minus the fact that Clemson doesn't utilize the transfer portal like FSU has. But even then, I think this shows you that if you're a Clemson fan, Dabo Swinney and this coaching staff, late in games, they kind of mishandle a lot of things. They have poor clock management, poor play calling. I don't know what happens to Clemson when they get into the fourth quarter of some of these ball games, but they just kind of implode on themselves. And I think that this definitely was a game that Clemson let get away from them. Florida State, they're still undefeated. They win this game in overtime, 31-24. Let me know your thoughts on this matchup down in the comment section down below.